was sitting here all morning.
Yeah,
it's all right there. I was wondering what they doing.
And I said, what is the fire department just sitting there for? That's what I'm thinking. Is it a conspiracy?
I mean, it was moving so unbelievably fast. The last thing I saw before the second attack was the silver underside of the plane before it went into the building.
No, it wasn't in the commercial airline. That second one wasn't no commercial. No, the second one definitely. The first one I never saw. The second one I saw was big, but it didn't have any markings on it that I saw.
No, I didn't see any. The second one, it didn't have, like no camouflage or anything.
No emblems, no logos.
The plane wasn't no airline or anything. It was a twin-engine, big gray plane.
Mark, were you close enough to be able to see any markings on the airplane?
It definitely did not look like a commercial plane. I didn't see any windows on the side.
No, it was a black plane. It looked like a fighter jet.
It looked like a fighter jet.
It was a military plane.
And it didn't look like a commercial jet.
Could be a drone aircraft. That's an aircraft that's guided electronically to its target without having a pilot.
Did you actually see the jet itself?
Yes.
And what type was it?
It was gray, to be honest with you. It was gray. It was it was like a 737.
I thought it was a fighter jet coming in to cover the city.
We've heard reports of secondary explosions after the aircraft impacted, whether in fact there wasn't something else at the base of the towers.
And the lobby looked as though a bomb had exploded there. All the glass was taken out. There were 10-foot by 10-foot marble panels that were once walls. Several people with their hair singed, skin hanging off.
And at that time, we heard a huge explosion. What I feared, I never in a million years feared those buildings coming down. Never. I did fear secondary explosion, or possibly a second plane. 30th floor. We hear another explosion.
I really thought it was maybe the end of the world. There was going to be more planes coming in. There was going to be bombs going off. I didn't know, to what degree they really just had us surrounded.
From World Trade Center, we took a hit on that last explosion. The man both is being evacuated this time.
He was dead?
It exploded and all just blew us all in.
The fire department's happened?
All back. There's no pulse, nothing.
The third explosion, the whole lobby collapsed on us.
What was it like? What was it like?
Horrible.
It's like hell. You don't want to know.
The whole building just collapsed on us inside the lobby.
Was that a secondary explosion?
Yes, it was.
That was the
Yeah, definitely secondary explosion. Because we was inside waiting to go upstairs, and on the way upstairs, the whole fucking plane blew, and we just collapsed on everybody inside the lobby.
Similar to the first tower coming down, secondary.
I don't know about the first one, but I know the second one was terrible. Then there was a third one too after that one. You're in the building trying to help people, and it's exploding on you inside the building. So I don't think it can get any worse than this.
Big boom, come down the steps, everything fine until we got to the basement, and then everything just fell in. I got trapped in there with another guy, crawled out, kept getting hit in the head, had bags all around. Finally, we clawed our way out over the rubble.
Yeah.
Come on, Don.
You did all right. All right, way to be, Tom. Let's go.
This was clearly, the way the structure is collapsing, this was the result of something that was planned. It's not accidental that the first tower just happened to collapse and then the second tower just happened to collapse in exactly the same way. How they accomplished this, we don't know.
They're thinking about bringing the building down. They didn't say what building. They just said bringing a building down. Last few seconds, he took his hand off, and you heard 3, 2, 1, and he was just saying, just run for your life, just run for your life. And then it was like another 2-3 seconds, you heard explosions. Like, boom!
Oh, you want to call your mother or something? You gotta get back. Get back. All right? Don't worry about me.
This was boom, and like you felt a rumble in the ground, like almost like you wanted to grab onto something.
He said, after the recent attacks which the U.S. has witnessed, the U.S. government ventured to point fingers at me, accuse me of involvement. The U.S. government has consistently blamed me for being behind every occasion its enemies attack it. I would like to assure the world that I did not plan the recent attacks, which seems to have been planned by people for personal reasons.
The president said that Osama bin Laden was the prime suspect. Why?
There's just a lot of evidence.
Oh, the reason I keep insisting that there was a relationship between Iraq and Saddam and Al-Qaeda, because there was a relationship.
2/3 of Americans say it's not worth fighting.
So?
So?
Given the known limitations of the cellular phone system in 2001, can you provide any evidence that the cell phone calls made by the passengers reported by the FBI could have been made from the altitudes, at the speeds, and for the durations indicated for each of them? We do know, however, that the calls were made, as no one has ever doubted that the relatives actually received them. This opens the way to a disturbing possibility, which seems to support the in-flight swap hypothesis, that the passengers were forced to call their relatives under duress, pretending to be on the airplane, while in fact they had already been landed in some unknown location. In support of this hypothesis, we have different elements. One is the conversation passenger Todd Beamer had with a GTA airphone operator, Lisa Jefferson, during the hijack of Flight 93. It is through Lisa Jefferson that the whole world learned about the famous call to action, "Let's roll."
When he told the guys, "Are you ready?" I assumed that they were waiting on his cue. Then they responded to him, and he said, "Okay, let's roll."
The 9/11 Commission has established that the hijack took place at 9:28. Todd Beamer was connected to Lisa Jefferson at 9:43, some 15 minutes into the hijacking. The FBI report confirms that Jefferson received the call from Beamer at approximately 8:45 Central Time, which is 9:45 Eastern. But the contents of the conversation are strikingly at odds with the official narrative. According to Jefferson, Beamer called to state that the plane was about to be hijacked. He stated that 3 individuals, 2 wielding knives, the third with a bomb strapped to his waist with a red belt, were preparing to take control of the flight. Jefferson estimated that she spoke to Beamer for 7 minutes before the 2 hijackers armed with knives entered the cockpit. This places the hijacking at around 9:52, while officially it took place at 9:28. This is no small discrepancy. How could Beamer be describing events that are supposed to be happening in front of his eyes, when in fact they had already happened half an hour before? How could the terrorists be preparing to take control of the flight at 9:45 when they had already been in the cockpit for more than 15 minutes? The FBI also wrote that Jefferson noted that the call had an unusually low amount of background noise, the same thing Liz Glick had noticed. Furthermore, the records show that Beamer's call lasted roughly 1 hour and that the line was left open after the crash. "We didn't lose a connection," stated Jefferson, "because there's a different sound that you use. I never lost connection. It just went silent." Jefferson stayed on the phone, stated the FBI, until she learned Flight 93 had crashed. Question: since airphones are powered by the same airplane's electrical system, how could the line have remained open for another 45 minutes after the plane had literally disintegrated to the ground in 1,000 pieces? All these discrepancies seem to suggest that Beamer was not on the plane, observing real events unfolding, but was describing an imaginary, pre-scripted situation from a different location. In support of this hypothesis, we also have the dramatic message left by flight attendant Cece Lyles in her husband's answering machine before briefly talking to him on her cell phone. As she herself is suggesting, we should listen very carefully.
10:47 a.m.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that.
We too can notice the absence of the typical background noise heard inside a plane.
I don't know what to say. There's 3 guys. They've hijacked the plane. I'm trying to be calm.
After saying goodbye, she seems to fumble with the headset while she whispers a few more words into the mouthpiece.
I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
End of message.
Even by playing the segment several times, it remains difficult to hear anything different from the words, "It's a frame." In any case, the problem with the phone calls does not change. The cell phone calls confirmed by the FBI in their reports cannot have been made from the cruising airplanes. Someone has to explain where they came from.
It was a military plane.
And the plane wasn't no airline or anything. It was a twin-engine, big gray plane.
We watched the first explosion. As we're watching the buildings, we saw a black, very large airplane fly right into the second building. It came out of the south, right in front of our eyes. It was so surreal, like a movie set.
Were you close enough to be able to see any markings on the airplane?
It definitely did not look like a commercial plane. I didn't see any windows on the sides.
I think a bomb went off in the lobby first, then a plane hit the building. But then another plane hit the other building. But when I was coming through the doors on the other side of the Trade Center, either they blew the lobby up or something, because it blew the glass out of the doors and knocked us all down.
You're in the building trying to help people, and it's exploding on the inside the building. So I don't think it can get any worse than this.
It wasn't from the jet fuel. No way.
United 93, check EM 350. United 93, 350, roger. United 93, that traffic figure is 1 o'clock, 12 miles eastbound 370. Negative contact, we're looking at United 93. Somebody call Cleveland? United 93, verify 350. United 93, verify your portable 350. United 93, verify your level of 350. United 93, Cleveland. United 93, Cleveland. United 92, if you're at Cleveland Center, I got please. United 1523, did you hear your company, did you hear some interference on the frequency here a couple minutes ago, screaming? Yes, I did, 797, and we couldn't tell what it was either. Okay. United 93, Cleveland, if you hear the center, I got. American 1060, a ditto on the other transmission. American 1060, you heard that also? Yes, sir, twice. Roger, we heard that also, thanks. I just wanted to confirm there wasn't some interference. Is that 956? Is that 956, Bill? I was just answering your call. We did hear that yelling, too. Okay, thank you. Yeah, we're just trying to figure out what's going on. Calling Cleveland Center, you're unreadable. Say again slowly. Center, did you hear the transmission where the airplane just said he had a bomb on board? Say again, was that United 93? Yeah, that transmission he said was unreasonable. It sounded like someone said they have a bomb on board. That's what we thought. We didn't get it clear. Is that United 93 calling? Sector 956, that aircraft we believe was transmitting at 12 o'clock, 5 miles. Turn left heading 225. I'll get you away from him. Okay, he's climbing, so I want to keep everybody away from him. Okay, I think we got him in sight. Well, the 1989 traffic views at 11 o'clock and 15 miles southbound. 41 timing looks like he's turning east by heading 360. Here's the captain. I would like to remain seated. On the board and going to next airport and our demand to remain quiet. Okay, it's United 93 calling. United 93, understand for the bomb on board, go ahead. United 956, did you understand that transmission? Okay, affirmative, he said there was a bomb on board. And that was all you got out of it also? Okay, affirmative. 93, go ahead. That aircraft you can't get a hold of, has he turned to the east now? He's just turned to the east also. United 93, you're here Cleveland Center. Okay, American 1060 and Executive 956, we just lost the target on that aircraft. Okay, 956, we had a visual out of this standby.
No second plane, it was a bomb. Bombed another building, not second plane. That was a bomb. Who said the second plane?
That's what we're told, the second plane.
No,
we saw it on television.
I saw everything.
All right, well, thanks a lot. This is...
Idea of how much of the plane actually impacted the building.
You know, it might have appeared that way, but from my close-up inspection, there's no evidence of a plane having crashed anywhere near the Pentagon. The only site is the actual site of the building that's crashed in, and as I said, the only pieces left that you can see are small enough that you could pick up in your hand. There are no large tail sections, wing sections, a fuselage, nothing like that anywhere around, which would indicate that the entire plane crashed into the side of the Pentagon and then caused the side to collapse. Now, even though if you look at the pictures of the Pentagon, you see that the floors have all collapsed, that didn't happen immediately. It wasn't until almost about 45 minutes later that the structure was weakened enough that all of the floors collapsed.
Jeff, it's a United Airlines plane, it's believed to be at that site outside Pittsburgh, isn't it?
That's exactly right, John, with 45 people total on board. And one of the more profound things today, the imprint of terrorism seared not only on Wall Street, but also on Main Street. Here you have an area 80 miles to the southeast of Pittsburgh, and this plane, which went down at about 10 o'clock this morning. We have rescue vehicles that came in earlier in the day, and they have turned up nothing. No one believed to be alive from this crash. Some of the media just getting back to the scene, which is about a quarter of a mile up on a hill back behind me, and so some of the first pictures just starting to come in within the last hour. I want to get quickly to Chris Kanicki. He's a photographer with the Pittsburgh affiliate of Fox affiliate. He was back there just a couple of minutes ago, and Chris, I've seen the pictures. It looks like there's nothing there except for a hole in the ground.
Basically, that's right. The only thing you could see from where we were was a big gouge in the earth and some broken trees. We could see some people walking around in the area, but from where we could see, there wasn't much left.
Any large pieces of debris at all?
No, there was nothing that you could distinguish that a plane had crashed there.
Smoke, fire?
Nothing. It was absolutely quiet. It was actually very quiet. Nothing going on down there, no smoke, no fire. Just a couple of people walking around. They look like part of the NTSB crew walking around looking at the pieces.
How big would you say that hole was?
From my estimates, I would guess it was probably about 20 to 15 feet long and probably about 10 feet long or 10 feet wide.
What could you see on the ground, if anything, other than dirt and ash? And
you couldn't see anything. You could just see dirt, ash, and people walking around, broken trees.
People don't understand. There may be more. Any one of these fucking buildings can blow up. This ain't done yet. See the firemen assembled here, the police officers, FBI agents. Towers. A huge explosion now. All of us.
My name's Tom Sullivan. I worked for Controlled Demolition Incorporated, CDI, the top-rated explosives demolition firm in the world, owned by the Loiseau family during the years surrounding 9/11. And I worked for them as an explosives loader for 2.5 years. As an explosives loader, my job was to place explosives in the buildings to prepare them for demolition. There are many steps that you need to take. First off is you have to weaken the building. To weaken the building, that means the staircase, all the staircases have to be cut at intervals. The firewalls have to be removed. The elevator shafts have to be cut.
I looked down to my right, and the elevators exploded, something out of like a Bruce Willis Die Hard movie. People just come running out of the elevators on fire, fireballed. I mean, it was like, what is going on here? Something's up here. I mean, the plane's up there, now there's fire down here.
Then you have to move to the support columns on the particular load floors. And those are cut by a torch for two reasons. First, to weaken them, and also to allow for charges to be placed onto the structure, onto the columns themselves. And that essentially reduces their strength by about 20%. And even with all of that work being done to weaken this building, it still remains safely standing, so we can continue to work in it. The story that just a few columns can cause a synchronized global collapse, an implosion, is, well, that's just nonsense.
Remain calm, given what is going on, remain calm. Oakland City Hall will remain open, but in San Francisco, City Hall has been closed. We're also just getting word here now that a second United Airlines jet, Flight 175, from Boston to Los Angeles, is now missing. Again, if you're just joining us, there have been 4 separate plane crashes. 3 of those planes were en route to California. 2 were heading to LAX. The 3rd was heading to San Francisco International Airport.
That was specifically the one heading to SFO, United Flight number 93 from Newark to SFO. It apparently crashed in Pennsylvania, fairly close to the border of Maryland and not too far from Camp David. Why is that significant? Because one of the groups possibly claiming responsibility for all these terrorist attacks is the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, and it was this week in 1978 that the Camp David Accords were reached. Is there a connection? At this point, we don't know, but it is important to be aware of that situation. In Washington, D.C., many congressional leaders have been transferred to a secret location. Some senators have described this as a second Pearl Harbor. And President Bush was in Florida this morning, but he made a brief announcement when the first attacks were clear on the World Trade Center, and he was heading back to Washington, D.C. At this point, we don't know exactly where he is. They're not really broadcasting that information, but we are told that the president is safe right now.
Yes, kit, get ready. Steel. Yes, steel, get ready. Plane. Yes, plane, get ready. Must. Yes, must.
A big rescue plan to deal with a big problem. I believe that that this plan will work.
Elevate position. 1, 2, 3, eyes on me. Good morning, boys and girls. Good morning, ladies.
Morning.
I have thought you be the most wonderful guest. Would you please stand and recognize the President of the United States?
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? I'd also like to meet the Secretary of Education and the Lieutenant Governor of Florida. We met, didn't we? Good to meet you. Hi. Great to meet everybody.
Eric? What are you doing? Eric?
Sit down, please. Thank you for standing up. Good to meet you all. Really excited for me to be here. I want to thank Ms. Daniels for being a teacher. I want to thank Lynn for being a principal. I want to thank you all for practicing reading so much. It's really important.
And this won't be a mistake. Everybody, tell me what this part of the word says.
Rob.
Yes, rob. Now tell me what the whole word says. Get ready.
Robber.
Yes, robber. And get ready to read all these words on this page without making a mistake. Look at the letter at the end and remember the sound it makes. Get ready.
Kite.
Yes, kite. Get ready to read this word the fast way. Get ready.
King.
Yes, king. Sound it out. Get ready.
King.
Sound it out. Get ready.
King.
What word? Pit. Yes, pit. Boys and girls, sound this word out. Get ready. Steel. What word? Steel. Yes, steel. Read these words the fast way. Get ready. Plane. Yes, plane. Get ready. Must. Yes, must. Let's read these words the fast way without making a mistake. Get ready. Kite. Yes, kite. Get ready. Kit. Yes, kit. Get ready. Steel. Yes, steel. Get ready. Plane. Yes, plane. Get ready. Must. Yes, must. Boys and girls, pick your reader up from under your seat. Open your book up to lesson 60 on page 153. Fingers under the title of the story.
Pearl Harbor. And
I don't see how this could actually happen in real life. When we load a building, we have to have all the support columns on a given load floor fail at the same time, within milliseconds of one another. And therefore, the entire building comes down in a synchronized implosion. So I think this notion of a one column failure causing an entire building to implode in a synchronized fashion is just nonsense. Looking at the building, it wouldn't be a problem once you gained access to the elevator shafts.
How about an elevator modernization, which we know was going on the 9 months prior to 9/11? Yes, Elevator World, March 2001 documents it. In fact, they were in the middle of this modernization. There are people who noted that the elevators were locked in turn and that there were guards placed at these locked elevators during the modernization. Of course, you would have to have access to security. Securicom was brought in. Who sits on the board of Securicom? Marvin Bush, the younger brother of George Bush.
Then a team of loading experts would have access to all the core columns and beams. The rest could be accomplished at that point by just the right kind of explosives for the job at hand. The choices are many out there. You wouldn't need miles and miles of det cord. You could have used wireless remote detonators, and they have been available for years. You need to only look at an action movie to see them in use, and of course the military has them as well.
You want to call your mother or something?
Contractors don't use them, on the other hand, because they're just too expensive. Well, you wouldn't have found steel casings to be left in the rubble. They haven't been used for years. What we use now is RDX copper-jacketed shape charges, and when they're initiated, there's nothing left of those charges. And in the case of thermite, well, thermite self-consuming cutting charges have been around since they first patented in 1984.
On the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York. While in Washington, a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon and the Budget Analyst Office, where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10th, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes.
Osama bin Laden.
The pundits knew within hours.
Osama bin Laden.
The administration knew within the day.
Terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbored them.
And the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap.
That a hijacker's passport was found blocks from the World Trade Center crash site, if you can believe that.
But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. That investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-TECH, Sibel Edmonds, OBL and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is ultimately of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly answering all of the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were
failure of imagination.
Because
Nobody in our government, at least, and I don't think the prior government that could envision flying airplanes into buildings.
Except the Pentagon, FEMA, NORAD, and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation into the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NIST has classified the data that they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of the collapse would jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. This man never existed, nor is anything he had to say worthy of your attention, and if you say otherwise, you are a paranoid conspiracy theorist and deserve to be shunned by all of humanity. Likewise him, and her. And her, and her, and him. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for a decade, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the entire planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media which told you the hard truths about
His head could be seen to move violently forward.
And
they took the babies out of the incubators.
And
mobile production facilities.
And
the rescue of Jessica Lynch.
If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit paranoid tinfoil dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you will never ever express doubts about any part of this story to anyone. Ever. This has been a public service announcement by the Friends of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DIA, SEC, MSM, White House, NIST, and the 9/11 Commission. Because ignorance is strength.